Clay Travis just destroyed Mark Cuban once again. This time it's on the China issue. I'm sure a lot of you don't really care, but they were originally arguing about what sport is most popular. Obviously, Mark Cuban is trying to say that the NBA is most popular, whereas Clay Travis was saying that other sports such as the NFL are becoming more popular than the NBA. I'm sure you don't really care about that, so let's get right into the good stuff. Here is a question that Clay Travis posed. Mark Cuban, should Chinese people have basic human rights? I think they should. Do you? Why will the NBA speak out so aggressively on, say, North Carolina bathroom bills and say nothing about China, all while pocketing their billions? Shouldn't basic human rights be a non-negotiable issue for a global brand like the NBA? And let's see what Mark Cuban had to say in response to that. What you're saying is the NBA is by far the most popular sport. We agree. All people deserve basic human rights, Clay, in all countries. So avoiding the question while trying to act like he answered the question, but of course he will never answer the China question. He will never do it. Clay Travis responds to Mark Cuban and says, so you disagree with the Chinese Communist Party putting their people in concentration camps and denying their people basic human rights? Why not have NBA issue that statement? If the NBA won't, why not have the Dallas Mavericks issue that statement? I'd be hugely supportive. So would most Americans of all political persuasions. It's true. There's pretty much everybody of all political persuasions out there would agree that everybody, even Chinese people, deserve basic human rights. But for some reason, people like Mark Cuban and the rest of the NBA refuse to admit that. They refuse to say anything about that, criticize China in any sort of way. Mark Cuban responds to that and says, come on, Clay, you don't give a F about human rights. You live to play gotcha. Your entire media existence seems to be about the wrong things other people are doing rather than the things you are doing. Rip on everybody else except, of course, your parent company. Your company, Outlook Media, is owned by Fox. You ever read this? Dude, he's acting like this is some kind of own. Like, we all know this. Seems like the company you work for is pretty damn woke, Clay. I think that is great for their business and probably makes Outkick a better company. I know this must be true because otherwise you would never work for a woke company like Fox. They would go broke. And Clay Travis responds to that tweet from Mark Cuban and says, this is lazy, Mark Cuban. Fox is a huge company with many different parts. Criticize Outkick if you'd like. I run it. Criticize Clay and Buck if you'd like. I'm on it for 3 hours daily. Criticize any opinion I write or say. Fair game too. Instead, you're reading employee handbooks because you're too much of a coward to say you support basic human rights in China. It's true, man. He went into a whole company handbook to try and gain some dirt on Clay instead of just simply answering the question, should people in China have basic human rights? It's wild, the gymnastics that these people play in order to avoid that question. Like, just answer, just say yes, people in China should have basic human rights. There shouldn't be any genocides or anything like that happening in China. And I disagree with China doing those things. But of course, they would never say that because then they would lose a whole bunch of money. Like hundreds of billions of dollars that the NBA gets is from China and from the disgusting things that China does. So of course, they would never, ever criticize China. It's not just Mark Cuban. It's 99% of the NBA. Clay Travis also says, I can't imagine being a billionaire and still being afraid to what I actually think because I'm worried about what communist dictators might think of me. What's the point of having FU money if you're too much of a bitch to even say FU to China? And then Mark Cuban just gets pretty butthurt and says, what would you say to someone in your family who got called a bitch in a disagreement, Clay Travis? I'll tell you what I would tell my kids. Whatever the argument is, you kick their ass. That's what people who just got their ass kicked do. They start calling you names, just smile and walk away. See ya, Clay. I don't understand how he could possibly, or anyone out there could possibly think that Mark Cuban won this exchange just simply because Clay called him a bitch. Like, Clay obviously is asking him a question that he's terrified to answer. And all Clay is doing is just saying, hey, do people deserve basic human rights in China? Like, that is not a tough question at all. That is not a difficult question. And he would say yes to any other country. But until you specifically ask about China, he will not answer that question. He will not say yes when you specifically ask about China. Ask about any other country. He says, yes, of course, people deserve basic human rights. Of course, there should be no genocides and there should be no concentration camps. Of course. But you ask about China, they avoid the question at all costs. And to try to spin this like you won this debate, like you won this exchange, there is no wins in there. There is nothing that you could have possibly won with other than like that employee handbook that you pulled out to try to expose him for being owned by Fox. Like, we all know this already, man. And like Clay says, Outkick is his own thing. It's not like Outkick is woke at all. There's nothing woke about Outkick. And I'm not like a huge Outkick fan. I do, like their articles quite a bit whenever they write about things that I care about. But I'm not like some huge Outkick fanboy. They're far from woke. Like, I understand that they're owned by Fox, and Fox is kind of going in a bad direction right now, but Outkick is not. Outkick is doing pretty well. Clay Travis responds to this Mark Cuban tweet and says, I tell my kids to stop being a bitch and stand up to Chinese human rights abuses instead of worrying about what evil dictators might do to their money, but I want my kids to stand on principle. You clearly put money over everything while pretending otherwise. Good luck, but. And like I said, everybody out there with a brain can understand that Clay Travis won this debate, and you can see that in the replies. This person, Conservative Barbie, says, still can't do it. Damn, you got dragged, Mark. Mark, say what you want, the entire world sees you getting on your knees for China. It's despicable, and nothing you will say can change that. Only your actions can change that, but you're too weak to risk anything, right? We see that too. Mark Cuban, when asked to condemn Chinese human rights abuses, what is avoidance behavior? True, man. He just avoids the question. It's not, like I said, it's not just Mark Cuban. I mean, I see Clay Travis and Mark Cuban go at it like every month on Twitter, like I said, and it's always the same thing. Clay Travis trying to get him to answer the China question and Mark Cuban just avoiding it. But it's not just Mark Cuban. It's the entirety of the NBA. It's most of these sports. It's not just the NBA. It's most of these sports. The NBA just hasn't learned yet that if they stop going woke, they can make a lot more money. The other sports are starting to learn, man, we should really stop this woke stuff. We should really stop this pride stuff, because we sure do make a lot more money when we don't do that stuff. The NBA just hasn't learned that yet, but I think they'll learn soon. And, people like Clay Travis bringing up the question over and over to people who own teams in the NBA, to big players within the NBA, I think it's good, man. I'm glad that people like Clay Travis exist that will call out Mark Cuban and also have a big enough following to where Mark Cuban can't really ignore people like Clay Travis. So I hope people like Clay Travis continue to call out people like Mark Cuban, and hopefully one day we get an answer, man. Hopefully, because truly, that would be the win. It's not about getting gotchas on Mark Cuban. It's not about getting gotchas on these woke people. Yes, that's nice and everything. But what would be even nicer is if they actually did condemn the human rights violations that were going on in China, instead of us just making videos and laughing at the fact that they're avoiding the question. You know what I mean? So let me know in the comments what you think about this whole exchange between Clay Travis and Mark Cuban in the comments.